Retail/service workers. What's the best instant karma you've seen happen to a rude customer? Story 1. I'm not sure if being a public defender counts as a retail or service worker, but considering that I provide criminal defense to indigent clients facing deprivation of their rights and freedom, I'll consider it service nonetheless. I was representing a scumbag client who was a massive head, who got high and beat the heck out of her 8-year-old daughter with a belt after she accidentally broke mommy's meth pipe. She was charged with child cruelty and possession of, and given her criminal record. The DA's plea offer was 3 years of prison. Needless to say, my client didn't want to go to prison for giving that cat what she deserved, and started freaking out on me when I told her that's the best offer I was going to get from the DA, and it was either accept that offer or go to trial. I further pointed out that the mountain of evidence against her, primarily the photographs of her daughter's injuries, the bloody belt that was recovered from her bedroom, the broken pipe with residue in it, and the fact that her daughter was going to testify against her at trial. After she was done cussing me out, calling me a public pretender, and every other derogatory name she could think of, she fired me and somehow managed to hire a private attorney for the low price of $8,000. I still don't know how she managed to come up with that, but I have plenty of reliable guesses. The private attorney guaranteed her that he could win her case at trial, and that's exactly what she chose to do. Long story short, the private attorney clearly never read this woman's file before trial. The trial lasted roughly 3 hours. The jury was literally out for only 5 minutes, and the judge sentenced her to 10 years of prison. It was a good day. Now that's justice served. Story 2. Let me preface my story by saying I work near Baltimore. Yeah, so I manage a plus-size women's clothing store. We actually get a surprising amount of, let's call them non-traditional customers. Guys who need a dress for a charity show, cross-dressers, gender-fluid people, transgender women, and drag queens aren't unheard of. So a drag queen comes into a store to pick up some shoes they ordered online. They must have been either coming from or going to a show because they were still in full makeup. I get their name, and during our conversation, another customer walks in. I call out greeting and say something like, "I'll be right with you." I go to the back room and it takes a couple minutes to go through all the web orders. I find the one I need and I'm on the way back to the counter. When the new customer throws her arm out to stop me from passing, she says, "I'm a new customer and I've been here for 20 minutes and no one has spoken to me." A. Greeted her when she came in. And B. She only had been in the store for 5 minutes at that point. I resigned myself to groveling. But before I could say anything, the drag queen stomps over, glares at the customer and says, "Jerk, she said hello to you," complete with sassy finger snaps. The queen then made a big show of thanking me for getting her package and gave me a big sparkly kiss on the cheek before she left. The other customer sheepishly paid for her Spanx and didn't make eye contact when I told her to have a good day. Story 3. I worked in this fancy clothing store in this posh town at the seaside. It was a busy Saturday when suddenly a very pretentious girl walked in with her boyfriend, ignoring us as we greeted her and even giving my colleague a demeaning look. She went on to browse around in the store and eventually took some clothes with her in the changing booth. After a while, I noticed a heated conversation arising from the booth between her and her boyfriend. I see the boyfriend running back and forth between the booth and some clothing racks. In the meanwhile, me and my colleague were being chased away by her. She refused any help and didn't leave the booth, as if we were a couple of Ebola patients. So me and my colleague continue working and helping other customers. I was working the register when suddenly the girl turns up next to me, completely ticked off, and she starts ranting about how our store/brand really should work on the fitting of our clothes and now we're complete screw-ups. I was completely caught off guard, and right when I wanted to ask her what the exact problem was, I saw my colleague looking at the girl while bursting out this horribly loud laugh, tears and all. What had happened was the girl had taken with her a clothing piece she thought was a strapless dress. Well, it wasn't a dress, it was a skirt. The girl had tried on all sizes and got completely fed up, yelling at us and her boyfriend because the freaking dress won't fit. So she walked out in a crowded store making a scene with the skirt pulled up to her boobs. Have to admit, after she left, laughed till crying. I would not have been able to wait until she left. How does one think a skirt is a dress? Story 4. Repost as I've told this story before. It was about 3 years ago. An employee, we'll call him Dave, was working at my retail store when 2 customers walked in at the same time. One black, one white. Dave was being trained on register after being there for only a month or so, with the manager standing behind him. The 2 customers got to the register at about the same time, but the black man beat him there. The black man then had the audacity to ask how good the product was before he bought it, and the white man behind him said, "Do I really have to wait for this freaking N-word to be done?" The black man was unfazed, but Dave said, "Sir, please don't use slurs like that or I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." White man, "Oh, big man? You're gonna make me leave, big man? Because I call this N-word a freaking N-word?" Dave, 6'5". "Yes, I am a big man. You have to leave now." White man, "Freaking fight me then, big man. I'll freaking destroy you." Dave, "Alright, I will. Let me clock out and grab my stuff and I'll meet you outside." The white man was a little surprised by the fact that he accepted. Dave turned to the manager and said, "Thank you so much for the opportunity, but I'm afraid I'm gonna have to quit." Manager, "Dave, I get it, but you don't have to do this." Dave, "Yes, I do." White man was getting himself pumped up outside as Dave clocked out, grabbed his coat and his Pepsi, and walked outside where he sucker punched the white man in the cheekbone, sprawling him out onto the curb. Dave drove off. Too long didn't read. Dave politely quit so he could knock a racist customer out with a single punch. I strive to be just like Dave. I think we all should. Story 5. I worked at Pure One Imports as a teenager outside Birmingham, Atlanta. This was about 20 years ago when transgender folks weren't on my radar at all. Anyway, it's near Christmas. I'm at the register with a line of customers waiting. There's a woman huffing about something near the end of the line. By the time she gets up to pay, she's being very loud about the customer behind her. It's a man, it's a pervert in a dress. The person behind her was very obviously born a man, but was in fact wearing a dress. It didn't really faze me as much as this woman who was doing her best to shame this person, who looked very hurt and embarrassed. And this lady was doing it by buying Christmas decorations, no less. Anyway, she's trying to convince me how wrong and gross it is, how this person shouldn't be in the store, etc. As she's ranting, I run her credit card. Declined. I'll try again. Declined. I rarely in my life experienced the satisfaction as I did in that moment, looking up at her smiling and saying that her card had been declined. Her face got red and she really just went off. That's impossible, try it again, you're doing it wrong. At this point she had the whole store looking at her as I try again and very loudly say it is in fact declined. She stormed out of there, knocking over a poor Santa statue by the door. I shared a smug grin with the customer behind her. Story 6. Former cell phone industry worker. We have to pitch insurance and a case every time you get a new phone. We have to. You can actually be fired from some carriers for refusing to partake in making these suggestions. During a normal new line setup, this insanely rude woman is hostile about every part of the exchange. Her credit is absolute dog poop, so she has to pay a gnarly deposit and more of the phone up front, and that's somehow my fault. Finalizing everything before she's completely rung up, I casually offered the same thing I do to literally everyone getting a new phone. Which insurance plan were you interested in and what kinds of cases have you looked at? Apparently that was the most offensive thing she'd ever heard in her life. She immediately raises her voice and makes it really uncomfortable for me because apparently I'm only accusing her of being clumsy since she's black, and I didn't charge her white friend nearly as much, and I'm just a racist blah blah superfan. I kept my composure and tried calmly explaining everything, even trying to let her know that I have to offer that to everyone, and I couldn't get anything across. Eventually my coworker lets me know he's got this. We swap places and finish each other's sales. As she steps out of the store looking down at the Galaxy Note 3 she had just spent a total of $500 something to get, she trips, eats crud and smashes the screen. Comes back in asking for help after raising hell and we just got to be all smug. God, I'm sorry, but that's so satisfying. Too bad the Note 3 had to be punished though. Story 7. I was a server during college at an upper-scale restaurant. I rarely had problems with customers, and am overall genuinely friendly. I had a table for 4 with only 3 patrons there, an older couple with their adult daughter. I served them beverages and was told we were to wait for patron number 4, the son. About 40 minutes and 2 refills go by. I say, I bet you guys are starving by now. Would you like me to bring out your lettuce wraps that are small enough not to ruin your appetite? Or are we still waiting for my buddy? Father said, we're gonna wait. And he isn't your buddy, Franklin, you don't know him. He's a hardworking man and will be respected. You're right, sir, forgive me. He actually has a real job. I understand, sir. It won't happen again. When I came back for refill number 3, the son was arriving. The son happened to be an old high school friend. Before taking a seat, he gave me a hug right in front of his dad. I looked at the father and said, small world, huh? I can't believe you're my old buddy name's family. I'm surprised you've never met me before, with Name and I spending so much time together in high school. It's too bad our restaurant didn't serve crow. The restaurant may not, but you definitely did. Story 8. I worked for an online banking help desk, and this 18-year-old lad phoned up saying he had seen a transaction for £7 to allpay.net, and because he didn't recognize it, he decided the bank were robbing him of £7 and that I was in on it, and I was a thieving little jerk. Then he gets his dad on the phone, who stuck up for his jerk of a son, saying I was a pathetic scumbag for stealing £7 off an 18-year-old boy, even though it was a debit card transaction and I simply worked in the department, which helped people use online banking. But anyway, phoned our debit card services to see if they could give any information, and boy could they. I then had the pleasure of relaying back to this little jerk's equally terrible father the following. Hi sir, thanks for holding. I've checked with our debit card services team and I now understand why your son would not have recognized the allpay.net. That is a deliberately vague term used for discretion when the customers have subscribed to online pornography. And that's what it was for. Your son has been paying for online corn. Would you like to pop him back on the phone so I can tell him it's a payment for his corn? Or will you pass on the information? The father just muttered that the issue did not require any further investigation. Thanked me for looking into it and hung up. Dang, imagine still paying, lol. Story 9. Worked at a telecom in Canada. I'm no longer an employee, thank God. Lady comes in with a broken iPhone and is demanding to get a new one for free. If you don't know, in Canada, the iPhone 6 is going for about $400 up front on a 2-year contract and a minimum $80 plan. She had a good plan, but wanted it for free. She called up our loyalty team in the store and spent the next 2 hours screaming at them. Finally, they agreed to a deal, and she's getting it for $0. She looks at me and says, I do not want a case and AppleCare is a scam. We work on commission, so this essentially meant I was getting paid nothing and ruining my numbers. She keeps telling me to hurry up through the setup and I was trying to get them out of the store with everything transferred over and set up. She grabs the phone and starts marching off saying I was a terrible employee. She gets 3 steps out of the store and drops the phone. Shattered scream and white screen of death. She ran back asking what I could do. I shrugged and went, sorry, but AppleCare sure would have helped, eh? Edit, the cell phone dream got me gold. Thank you, kind stranger. Second story of someone dropping their phone right outside the store. I love it so much. Story 10. I used to return customer credit cards by setting them up on the square podium, and used to swipe them so they ended up right by them when I swung the screen around from them to sign and such. One lunch rush, takeout restaurant. One lady decided this was an offense of the highest order and yelled at me for not placing it directly in her hand. I stupidly engaged her and tried to explain that I did that for everybody, which got me a continued lecture about how she is the customer and good service is doing what she wants and so on. There were about a dozen people eating at her tables and 5 people in the line behind her, so she was straight up hamming it up, making sure everyone saw her putting me in my place. Unfortunately for her, the dramatic performance proved to be a bit too distracting and she stormed out without her infant. This was of course noticed by pretty much everyone in the building since she had just made herself the center of attention. One of the customers even had to run after her and stop her from driving away. For the record, there is no real subtle way to pick up a full child-sized carrier. Too long didn't read. Woman shows full restaurant that she values her credit card over her child. Performs walk of shame. Story 11. I had a woman come into my bank one day years ago in mid-August and try to cash a check. Said check looked like it had been written by a 4-year-old who went through the protocol as mandated by our organization, calling the issuer and verifying all data. While we were going through this procedure, the woman went off on a tantrum. She's ripping the little pens with chains from the little desks, throwing deposit slips around, demanding she speak to the president of the bank and verbally abusing all the employees. Likewise, she looks like she had done enough speed to stay up for a week straight. We are finally able to get a hold of the issuer of the check. Lo and behold, it's a good check. We cash it, thank her for her patience. As she's storming out cursing, 2 officers walk in and identify her as the owner of the car in the parking lot. Said car had a small child, no more than 2, locked inside the entire time, 20 minutes, in August. Some good people called the cops, broke out the window and rescued the kid and had that jerk arrested. I hope to God that that little kid has found a new home, or that his mom has cleaned up her act. Story 12. In the auto repair business, we must deal with a lot of passive aggressiveness from people displeased with having to shell out money for their cars. Once a couple arrived to pick up a car which was parked in the first spot nearest the street. The husband was great and had approved the needed repairs in stride. The wife was a raging maniac, debating every line item of the estimate, asking pointless questions, demanding a cheaper price, threatening to take the car elsewhere or just get a new one. Anyway, the man made his way towards the office, but the woman made a beeline for the car, found the keys stashed inside, threw the plastic seat cover to the wind, then started it up and drove off, before the bill had been paid, cutting the turn too sharp and scraping the entire passenger side of the car badly on the low concrete planter. I saw this happen. The husband didn't. Never saw them again. I cannot imagine they stayed together after that. Story 13. Was working at a restaurant, and there was this family who were extremely trashy and didn't look like they had a lot of money, despite ordering a bunch of expensive steaks and drinking a bunch of drinks. They were rude the whole time, treating me like I was their butler or slave, then asked for a manager to tell the manager that their steaks tasted rotten after they finished, and their drinks don't taste like they had any alcohol in them. Again, finished. Just trying to get free food. My manager noticed the way they were treating me. I knew they were full of garbage and refused to comp their meal like they were demanding. They began yelling and cursing at him and me, and ended up trying to leave without paying, only to have their car not start in the parking lot, and my manager called the police and one of them got arrested for disorderly conduct and drug possession. And the rest ended up walking having their car towed. Story 14. Currently at a consignment shop. We have 2 stories of furniture, and it's only things people bring in for us to sell for some profit. A lady came in with her son. He was 5 or 6, and she looked around. We had 2 bar stools, and she came up to the desk and said, "I'd like to order 2 more of these bar stools." I smiled and said, "We can't do that. Those belong to someone, and that's all they had to co-sign with us." She looks back and says, "Well, why the heck can't you order ones like this? I'm sure you can find them online." I clench my teeth and smile again, saying, "Ma'am, we really can't do that. If you'd like to go online, you are more than welcome to look for yourself, but I can't help you, and I'm sorry." She huffed and started walking to the door, talking about me getting fired, making a horrible review of this place. She then got a nice big face full of doors. It's the push door, and it was locked. She looks at me and screams, "Why the heck is this locked?" I have no idea. Then her son looks at her and says, "Mommy, you were mean to that lady, and I don't want to go till you say sorry." Best kid ever. That kid must have an amazing dad, because it definitely didn't learn any manners from its mom. Story 15. I worked at a restaurant that was very popular for brunch and Mother's Day. It was probably our busiest day of the year. I had a customer call the evening before and asked for a table for 6. And he was incredibly rude when I informed him that this would simply be an impossibility. He kept getting more and more worked up, asking me to speak to my manager. At first, I didn't want to pass the phone over. My manager wasn't the nicest guy, and we were in the middle of a busy dinner shift. But my manager came up behind me and demanded to know why I had been on the phone for so long. I was like, this freaking customer isn't going to listen to me anyways, and gave the phone to Mac. I asked how he could help, listened for about 15 seconds before telling this dude something like, "So you're tying up my hostess in the middle of dinner, even though she's already told you nicely that we can't fit you and your goddamn family in the night before our busiest day of the year? Screw you, buddy," and hung up the phone. Story 16. Warehouse worker here. Customers have to show a card to shop. Even though we're not technically a grocery store, we don't allow pets. One dude tried to power walk past the employee at the entrance door holding a big pit bull puppy on a leash. We stopped him and told him he couldn't bring the dog inside, and he lost it. He's our best customer and he's here 5 times a week and he owns stock, blah, whatever. He demanded to know why we don't allow dogs. We explained how it's a food safety issue, especially with an untrained puppy. At this point, our manager came over and just waved him through, because no backbone/customer's always right. Well, not even 5 minutes later, this dog squats in the middle of the main aisle and pees, followed by poop. The man turned so red and dragged the dog towards the exit, abandoning his groceries. We stopped him and asked him nicely, please clean up after his pup. That's the reason we don't allow them, sir. Story 17. Not exactly retail, but food service. At a college football game, my coworker was chewed out by an alumni because the hot chocolate wasn't chocolatey enough. All she and I could really do was sit there and apologize because there was nothing we could really do. Until the bartender chimed in. This bartender is a former high school teacher, currently a substitute school teacher for all grades K through 12. And the look she shot this man could have immediately shut up the cockiest of teenagers. Anyway, she put on her scolding face and warned him, if you continue yelling at these girls over something they can't control, I'm gonna have to ask you and all your friends to leave. I will not tolerate anyone abusing my coworkers. This guy immediately clammed up and hurriedly walked away with his tail tucked between his legs. Oh, you already know she didn't put up with any garbage as a substitute either. Story 18. I was waiting at hotel reception while a young staff member checked me in. A really obnoxious woman flounced over, interrupted what the girl was doing, and proceeded to complain about the standard of the kettle in her room. She ranted on and on about only having a normal kettle, until I told her to wise up and get in a bloody line behind me. She shouted that she had been traveling all day and that the room was not suitable standard. I pointed out it was a freaking airport hotel. We'd all been traveling all day and that she should just get lost. By now, the girl at the desk was blood red and tearful. The woman banged her fist on the desk, demanded to see a manager, and then had a fit of coughing. She promptly pooped herself all through her beige trousers. She didn't hang around after that. Story 19. As a teenager, I was working part-time at a convenience store. I was being trained by the late-night cashier. This dude comes in and grabs a bunch of cans of vegetables and such. Comes to the counter and stacks the cans in a very specific way, like a weird kind of pyramid on the counter. As the experienced cashier, my trainer takes each can off the pyramid and rings it up. She reaches the end of the stack and we realize that the weirdo has his pee-pee out. What? And has it laying on the counter behind the cans. Without saying a word, the trainer grabs one of the big heavy metal cans of beans and slams it down as hard as she can on the guy's pee-pee. He screamed an incredible scream of searing pain, grabbed his wiener and ran out of the store. She told me calmly, you get all kinds on the late shift. At no point during this whole story did I know where it was going. Story 20. Standing at the counter of the pizza place I work at. Lady storms in and slams the pizza down at the counter. This isn't the freaking pizza I ordered. What the heck are you gonna do about it, she asked. I look at the pizza, then tell my buddy Nick and turn back to her and say, nothing. She then goes on a long rant telling me how we're gonna get fired, how stupid and how incompetent we are. She actually told me I must be the R word, and asked why the heck we weren't gonna do anything. I said, because that pizza came from the pizza shop across the street. I think she actually managed to shrink in size and slink out looking so pathetic and beaten. I almost felt bad for laughing till tears dripped down my face as she slunk off. Story 21. I work at the hotel's front desk. One day we had an Armenian guest who was claiming his room was not up to his standards and decided to make a big deal about it the next morning. He was so rude to the point of almost making a coworker cry of desperation because she refused to compensate the night as his arguments seemed really fake and invalid. Once he saw he was not going to get anything back, he threw his receipt on the floor and power walked his way out into a very clean glass door that was recently cleaned. His sunglasses broke, causing a small cut on the upper part of his nose. My coworker and I couldn't stop laughing the second he walked out, even more mad. How did you manage to wait to laugh until he left? Story 22. When I was the cashier at Borders, I had this one customer that had either put something on reserve or had special orders. I remember them getting really rude because I couldn't find it and asked them multiple times what the name was. It eventually turned out that it was placed under her husband's name, so it wasn't my fault I couldn't find it at all. She didn't apologize or anything, so it felt really nice when I swiped her card and it was declined. She felt so embarrassed and just stormed off. Story 23. Working the window at McDonald's late at night. Guy orders whatever and pulls up to the window. I'm cooking and handling the window, so I wasn't there when the customer pulled up. When I walked up to the window, I didn't see them with trash in his lap. I opened the window to take his card/cash and he throws a bag of trash at me. I take a step back, bothered that I just got trash thrown at me, and I watch his car speed off. I'm ticked, but there's nothing I can do. A couple seconds later, I hear a small bang of metal on metal. I walk to the lobby and look out the windows. The jerk slammed into a police cruiser who was about to loop around and use the drive-thru himself. Of course, I also went to tell the officer what had just happened inside. Story 24. Worked at Best Buy 10 or so years ago. This happened on Black Friday. Most of the customers were in bad moods since they'd been waiting hours to come in and stand in more lines. But this one lady was a raging jerk. After yelling at everyone in my department about how she needed the laptop that was on sale despite it being sold out, she proceeds to tell us she'll have the store closed down because she works with the city and knows the fire marshal and we have too many people in the store. So she calls him, we tell her to leave, and nothing happens to the store. However, we called them as to report what she said, and she got fired from her job for abuse of power. Story 25. Worked at a gas station some odd years ago, and the week before it had been snowing a lot, so the gas tankers got delayed due to safety reasons. A customer came in a pretty new Mercedes-Benz, something like SLS 400 or something, and wanted the premium gas. I explained to him that the tankers are delayed and we currently don't have any premium gasoline, and that he could try the next station down the block. He started swearing at me personally, like I had control over the gas delivery. He sped off, tires screeching, only to have his rear tire hit the curb. His rims got ruined, ended up really bad and couldn't drive it. I laughed at him. The whole time I was reading that, I was so hoping something would happen to his car. Needless to say, I'm happy. Story 26. Late to the party, but whatever. Back when I worked at a Blockbuster, we'd occasionally deal with thieves. The standard was just to let them go, not endanger employees or customers. One time this guy grabbed some stuff and bolted. My manager runs after and points him out to two cops that had parked in our parking lot. They give chase, this guy dodges and weaves through people and traffic. He successfully crosses the street with cops on foot. Desperate to lose them, he jumps down some stairs to gain a lead, but breaks both legs. Ooh. Sorry, but that's deserved. Story 27. Working drive-thru at a Tim Hortons, and some butthole in a massive black truck parked too far away from the window and expected me to lean super far out to give him his change. He was really impatient and just really rude. I just shook my head and he gets all ticked off and finally got out of the truck and the door shut behind him. Sure, it ticked off everyone behind him, but at least they were all ticked off at him and not us. He acted like it was the biggest embarrassment of his life. Story 28. Guy comes in and is being a complete butthole. Not wanting to show ID to buy beer even though he looked 20 at the oldest, constantly yelling and swearing. He also had parked in the handicap spot despite not having handicap tags or plates on his car. One of my regular customers, who is a sheriff's deputy, was also in the store, saw how the guy was acting, saw where he was parked, went out, got his ticket book, and wrote the guy a ticket. Guy realized he wasn't getting his beer, went outside to find out he was getting ticketed. I could not stop laughing. Story 29. More than a few decades ago, I worked at Denny's. I had two male customers that decided to dine and dash, got their license plate number and reported it to the cops and jokingly mentioned that they didn't even tip. Later that night, they got pulled over for DUI. Cop recognized the license plate number from the report, brought them both back to the restaurant and forced them to pay the bill. After he was done paying, the cop just stood there and looked at them and said, "Well?" The guy sheepishly handed me my tip. That's gotta be the best cop ever, oh my god. Story 30. I was a cashier at a grocery store. This guy with a full cart complained and bullied employees until he was allowed to use my express checkout because he didn't want to wait in regular lines, and my line only had 2 people in it. As soon as my floor manager allowed him and he had his cart unloaded, a tiny old lady with a walker who could barely stand got in line behind him. Everyone gave him dirty looks. He realized he messed up and tried to make a joke about it. Dead silence. I hope his save time was worth being a butthole. Story 31. In Hawaii at the resort bar, kid that looks about 18. I'd have served him. Orders a drink, barman asks for ID, hands over ID. Sorry, this is expired. Kid loses his mind, insults the barman, threatens his livelihood, etc. Fast forward 2 days, sat in the bar at the airport. The same guy came in, ordered a drink, the lady behind the bar asked for ID, hands over ID. She looked at him and went to hand it back. I pipe up, check the expiration date. Jerk move, but karma is, as they say, a you-know-what. Story 32. Worked at a liquor store. Customers came in extremely intoxicated, couldn't really speak, stumbling everywhere. We refused to sell to him and he flipped out, ended up kicking him out with the threat of calling the police. He went down the street to another store and as soon as he walked past our store, he yelled some very mean things at us and immediately tripped, shattering the bottle he bought on the sidewalk. It was a glorious sight. Story 33. I work at an auto parts store. This one guy stole some $60 headlights and literally sprinted out the door. We went to look outside to try to get his license plate, just in time to see him speed off, hit a curb, and blow out his tire. Called the cops and the idiot got arrested and had to have his car towed. Was saving the $60 really worth it? Story 34. Lady lays to me about the amount of the bill and called me a very bad word in the English language. As we overbilled her, she requested I go through her order. Come to find out we underbilled her by about $1,000 due to a misplaced zero. The silence on the other line was so beautiful. Story 35. I used to work at a bank branch. A client was being very disrespectful to a female staff member. Literally 2 minutes later, our bank was robbed at the teller he was using. His $5K was taken right off the counter before it could be negotiated. Eventually it was covered by the bank, but at the time I can imagine him being worried. Story 36. When a rude customer's card would be declined, it would always bring a real smile to my face. Story 37. Gotta love when I get to tell a rude customer that their coupon is expired/not valid. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more videos to come or else this spider will be in your bed tonight.